What do you have coming up? Do you have a project coming up now that this is...
Yeah, I'm very much interested in the whole issue of the shifting in terms of experience from guilt to shame. And Eric Erickson, the psychologist, helps me a great deal, and some pastoral theologians like John Patton and Don Browning help very much so in terms of helping to see the shift. But what I'm interested today is in the whole issue of who's going to love me. The movie Precious, that was a major theme, who's going to love me. And there's some other themes, particularly for African American men, who's going to recognize me, who's going to notice me. It's a major issue, for African American males. The invisible man, Ralph Ellison, that kind. So I'm interested in doing some research around the issue of how we are experiencing life today and why. And I can understand it, in terms of Erickson, because guilt for Erickson is later in the developmental cycle, but shame is much earlier within that context. And shame has everything to do with relationships and love and the inability to internalize caring significant others.
Right.
And if that stage of the life cycle, which is early, is not fulfilled, and things like that, the guilt will not be there because you're in pursuit of love. And I've seen it in counseling. People would do some things that we would consider to be totally socially unacceptable, but they were in search of love. But as soon as in the counseling, long-term counseling relationships, people begin to internalize the therapist, and that the therapist then became an internalized source of care and love for them, then you begin to see the issue about the guilt over how they went about trying to find love. It surfaces. So that has been something that I have noticed since I first started pastoring. Because at the same time that I started pastoring, I was also in supervision for pastoral counseling. So I actually started supervision in pastoral counseling in 1968. That's when I started full-time pastoring as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So I've seen it. So I want to do more research on the many ways in which people experience are experiencing life and the need to be loved.
Right.
And so the issue of shame, I'm not as much interested in social shame, shaming,
right.
You're shamed because you're doing bad things. I'm interested in how people feel unloved and unlovable, and the transition from that into guilt, that kind of things like that, but based on relationships. It would be a follow-up, but it is a follow-up. I don't know if I would be doing as much library research, but I am reading a lot of Wesley, even still, because you can see his therapeutic model as well as his what they call juridical model, working hand in hand, working together, within
Now, really interested in hearing your story about not being here. You are professor, longstanding, written many books, pastor as well, doctor, and started out for quite a while not being able to read. And I think this is a great story.
I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but my first 10 years of educational experience was in New Jersey, in a place called Lawnside, New Jersey, and it's a historic place because it was originally called Snow Hill, New Jersey, and it was an underground railroad stop, so it's historic from that standpoint. But also historic because, for example, I'm a Jarena Lee professor of pastoral care. She and her husband were pastors there in the A&E church there. In Lawnside or Snow Hill within that context. I went to an all-black school within that context. My parents were very well educated. My dad was on the school board, and my mother taught in the Philadelphia school system, and that type of thing. So, but to be popular, when I was growing up, black boys did not read, did not learn to read within that context. And so, being a preacher's kid, Methodist minister's kid, that kind of stuff like that, I was very much interested in being one of the boys, so to speak. Yeah. And so you did whatever you had to. Like, for example, I had a filthy mouth, I could cuss up a storm, but I also was a good athlete. I was not a street fighter. I hated to fight in the street, but there's not too many folk I could, that my age that I couldn't, whip and that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't fight in the street, But I would, play sports, wrestle. I could run. I was very fast. Those types of things like that. But it was not popular to read. It was quite interesting, and so I did not want to be labeled, as being unpopular, that kind of stuff. And I would pretty much say anything and do crazy things in order to be like. But I did not realize until after I went to seminary and was working on my graduate degree, and at Harvard, you can only use their library, I think, twice a year, and so you had to have all the things that you wanted to look up, before you went,
Right.
And so I found this journal, and I think when I was doing my pastoral counseling training early on, and like I said, it started in '68. The guy said I was passive aggressive, so I wanted to find out what this passive aggressive stuff was all about, and discovered that one of the major characteristics of a passive aggressive person had to do with inability to read. It was a psychological hostile move against high expectations,
right,
which your parents set.
Yeah.
Right. And also, but it's also a way of being popular. And so I could read in the 8th grade. What my mother did and father did is that they just got me a tutor,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And so, I learned the basics, and that's really how I've taught all my life. When I was in college, and had a tutor in every subject for 2 years, and they used to get mad at me because they said, "Really, you don't need tutoring." And let me tell you what happened when I went to the University of Arizona. We had to take everybody had to take these tests for educational preparation. Okay, most of the football players had to take English X. Well, I didn't have to take English X. Now that shows you.
Yeah.
At least I did not have to take English X, and that was they said I really was borderline, but they said that. But my parents spoke perfect English.
Right.
So that's how so even though I couldn't read, I knew what was going on, and when I went to tutoring, I understood what was going on. But tutors really taught me how to think, and they were interested in me. They were interested in what I had to offer and what I had to learn. And so, I'm really into what they call metacognition now.
Right. Can you define that?
Metacognition really is giving students agency and control over their own learning. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when I was being tutored, they were teaching me what my gifts were and what I really had to offer within that context, and I could enter what I was learning, into my own experience and integrate it and that type of thing. And so, and I was a history major as well in college and things like that, and I could put the history together, but also I was interested in literature, I was interested in humanities and seeing the two relate. So I was really enjoying college. Right. In fact, kind of resented football, because it was getting me in the way of the stuff that I was learning. Right. And so when I went to seminary, and once I understood what was going on and things like that, I was in academic heaven. So, right.
Can I just, as a parting question, ask you to, if there are any in the community here who are having difficulty reading? They're here at one of the schools that we have, and yet they're still sort of hiding a secret. What would you say to them?
Basically, I would talk to the teachers first, and saying that they're key. Mm-hmm. And that's been my mantra for a long, long time. In fact, I used to work. I can't think of her name. I wish I could. The person who was head of the, the reading and writing. Learning Institute over at Spelman, and they were saying it starts with how you formulate your syllabus and your learning outcome, right, and things like that. So basically, if they got this far, there's some gifts there. Right. Okay. It helps the student to identify those gifts and that type of, and don't put the student down, and encourage the student, and then encourage the student to put his or her own experience into what they're learning and within that context. And then if they need some real remedial work, then make sure that they get that. Right. That would be on them. But I would encourage the faculty members not to give up on folk, because nobody gave up on me.
Right.
Within that context.
For the student themselves,
Yeah.
What would encourage them to sort of come out and say, I need help, or I need help?
I think, because metacognition has shown that if you can get the student, what do you call it, committed, right? Mm-hmm. Committed to their own learning.
Okay.
And not credentialing, that would be the major issue, and that they would be willing to do whatever is necessary. It's trying to get them turned on to academics.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what got me, because I knew I could write, I knew I could put things into words, and that's the other thing too, is that I can talk, and as you can see. Within that regard, but I think I can write better.
Okay.
I talk, and so I'm saying nobody's going to listen to me. I'll just put it in the book. That was my attitude.
Right.
Just write it down, and whatever I believe, I put it down.
Well, you've done that. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Dr. Wimberly, thank you very much for this. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything that you're doing, as well as what Daniel's doing as well.
Thanks very much.